Welcome to this next session for Precision Planting Winter Conference 22. My name is Doug Wiegand, and I'm going to be doing this session with Tristan Herman. Tristan is one of our project leads. Justin talked with him about him on stage, working with cameras in the Precision Vision module. But this session is titled Emergence Matters. Since I was a young boy, I've been out walking fields. My dad owned an ag retail business for 20 years, and we farmed since I was young. And as you're walking fields, you'd always find these areas of the field, sometimes hopefully not the whole field, sometimes the whole field, but areas of the field where something didn't quite get right, didn't quite go right. You didn't know what it was because you prepped. You got everything ready, you went through the planter, you tried to plant at 4 to 5 mile an hour. You tried to do everything right. But emergence just wasn't there. And as we think about emergence, guys, what I think about today is sunlight. What does sunlight have to do with emergence? You see, I'm 5'9". I was always a short guy, right? And when I look at a plant, it really doesn't matter what species of plant, whether it's corn or beans or peanuts or cotton, doesn't really matter. A plant harvests sunlight. And through photosynthesis, they convert oxygen and water, and it converts it into sugars, right? It creates food within that plant. And if that plant harvests less sunlight within its life compared to its neighbors right beside it, it's going to produce less food. Really doesn't matter what type of plant, does it? And if it produces, so I'm 5'9". If somebody's 6 foot next to me, we're standing out in the parking lot all day long, who's going to get more sun, him or me? He will. That's why I'm a runt, right? Because he always harvests more sunlight, right? So if you're a plant, you're going to win. And so what we want is we want every plant to come out of the ground the exact same time. We don't want a bit of difference in the emergence, because if we do, we're not going to see that final yield potential that genetics, that plant, that acre, the nutrients that we added in, all that investment, we've lost if emergence is not the same. It's the biggest variable that you and I, that we can manage when we put a crop into the ground. It has the biggest impact on every investment that we put into that crop if emergence is variable. So as we think about that, it's not just corn. We study corn a lot over the years and the decades here at Precision Planting, but it's cotton in the South. It's soybeans. It's peanuts. It is corn. It's sunflowers. And it's all the other species of plants that we talk about, or that we go out and we farm, we put in the soil. And if the emergence is variable, one plant's going to produce more than the one beside it. That's just what's going to happen. It's simple math. It's the way God made it. And so when we follow through to harvest, what do we see on that plant that's perfectly spaced? It's a single seed. It's not a double, but it doesn't have an ear on it. It's got a cob, but that's not what we were shooting for. We know that plant did not harvest as much sunlight as the neighboring plants. And when we look at cotton in the South, that late emerging plant, how did it fare? It had the same potential, but it didn't deliver, did it? So as we think about emergence and emergence mattering and sunlight, and we got to start with the seed, don't we? So we're going to do that. We're going to back up. We're going to start with the seed. We're going to put the seed in the soil. And what does that seed need? If we got to have consistent emergence, we first have to have consistent germination. Every seed has to germinate at the exact same time. So as I put that seed in the soil, what's it require for germination? It requires moisture, doesn't it? What else?
Temperature.
Yeah, there we go, temperature. And there's one other thing, isn't there? And many times people don't talk about this, but it requires oxygen. You see, a seed has to breathe in oxygen. If I put a seed in a swimming pool that is 80 degrees, it will not germinate. It's going to drown just like you and I. It's got to have oxygen. And so we have to have pore space within that soil. So as we look at the environment that we're going to go put that seed in there, what are the things that you and I have to manage that are going to fight against those variables? Well, the first thing is residue. There's a lot of it there, isn't there? So what we ask ourselves is, somebody come to me and they said, hey, tell me about row cleaners, or why do I need row cleaners? I said, well, the question isn't why do you need row cleaners? The question is, what is the cost of residue around the seed? You got to answer that question first. If you can't answer that question, if there's no cost, then don't buy residue managers. Don't buy row cleaners. The agronomic cost of residue near a seed and the roots of a young plant. Number one, it wicks moisture away. See, residue soaks up like a sponge water molecules out of that soil profile. And they say that on the chemistry side, when the H2O molecule is attached to that residue, that bond is strong enough that if a seed gets up against it, that water is unavailable water. The bond is strong enough, seed can't pull it away. So residue around the seed is going to delay the water imbibing into that seed. Insulation. We've been measuring this for years, where if I go out in the field and I strip some residue away, in daytime temperatures behind stripped residue, cleaned residue, it's 15 to 20 degrees warmer versus if I take an existing residue, move it away and measure it. 15 to 20 degrees difference. Is that going to affect germination consistency from seed to seed to seed if I have variable residue? Absolutely. And then the next thing we look at is seedling blight. You see, when the soil temperatures warm up to 60, 65 degrees, they say microbe populations that are decomposing carbon out there in the field double. The populations explode. They double every hour. While they're doing that, they're munching on this carbon and they're exploding and dying off, and they release toxins. Those toxins from that decomposing of residue is a high risk of offering seedling disease called seedling blight. That's not just a risk at germination, but that's also a risk early on in that plant's life that it can stall it out. And then while those microbes are decomposing that residue and those populations are exploding right around that seed and that young plant, guess what they require? Guess what they immobilize out of the soil? The available nitrogen and phosphorus that's in solution form. There's just small amounts in solution form at any one time. And the microbes are now competing with that young seed, with that young plant, and you're at risk of nutrient deficiency. So when we think about nutrient deficiency, it's not just the seed, it's the young plant. You see, corn lives off the starch of the seed and the seedling root. 80% of its nutrition comes from those two things through V3. So if I take that seed out with seedling blight prior to V3, I may come out and have perfect emergence at V1. I come back at V4 and I've got variability. Dig those plants up. What you'll find a lot of times is seedling blight. Disease took that seed out before it transitioned the baton off to the V4 and those bigger roots. So here's a study. You see the board over here on the right-hand side, and I got a picture up on the screen. Jason Webster and the PTI commercial agronomy team up in Pontiac at the PTR farm, they took some furrows and they cleaned one of residue, 0%. And then they put about 10% mix of residue within a furrow. And then they put about up to 30% mix of residue in the furrow. And they ran all those to yield, and then they went out there and they picked them. And you can see that I don't know if that bottom row emerged at the same time or not. It may have. But the residue took away, didn't it? The only variable was residue. It wasn't different soil types. It wasn't different weather patterns. It was just residue. So residue management's a big deal. So as we think of the economic cost of residue, not just the agronomic cost, 1.3 bushel per acre. This is a 4-year average from our Pontiac research farm that shows that every 1% they literally hand placed residue near a seed, 1 out of every 100, and then 2 out of every 100, and so on and so on. They took it to yield. They've done that 4 years in a row now. And it's 1.3 bushel loss for every 1% more residue you put in the furrow. That's a 4-year average. So we ask ourselves, okay, well, we got to get rid of residue. We understand this. It's a cost agronomically and economically to the yield, right? So as we think of residue, we first got to ask, okay, what kind of residue managers do we need? What kind of row cleaner should we buy? And so there's some really popular ones on the market we've used for years. Here's a Martin floating row cleaner that's row unit mounted. It's got 3.5-inch wide treader wheels that Precision Planting engineers designed instead of the inch and 3/4 that comes standard with it. And the 3.5-inch wide, we learned that if you went into conventional till, 4 inches of worked ground, that wider footprint versus narrower footprint helped keep those row cleaners on top. They did a little better job. A lot of guys love them. And then we took, and here's another Martin floating row cleaner, row unit mounted, and it's got narrow treader wheels, the inch and 3/4. And there's situations and there's environment that, you see, if you ask me, Doug, what row cleaner should I buy? I'm going to ask you, what's your tillage system? Where do you live? What's your soil types? Are you no-till? Are you cover crops? I'm going to ask you a lot of questions because I can't just give you a blanket answer. One size doesn't fit all. We got to customize this approach. And then there's shark tooth. If you tell me you're no-till and you're cover crops and you've got a lot of tall grass, tall weeds, I'm going to say, man, you need shark tooth. You need the shark tooth from Yetter or the razor tooth from Martin's. Okay? And so a couple years ago, our engineers took a stab at this. We've been analyzing residue row cleaners for a few years. And what they did is they designed a system, and instead of mounting it to the row unit, the faceplate of the row unit, they mounted it to the bar in front of the row unit. You ask, why would they do that? Well, the other things they did is they created a few other unique designs within the Reveal row cleaner that's different than really anything on the market. The first thing is the gauge wheel is adjustable in relation to the residue wheels, the spikes. So I can get out of the planter and I can say, hey, I look at my furrow and I can see some residue. I want to get a little more aggressive. I'm going to put it to notch 4. I can say, man, I'm a little too aggressive. I can take it down a notch. So I can adjust, you and I, we can adjust that gauge wheel in the aggressiveness of those spikes to customize that residue management with every situation. The next thing they did is they designed a gauge wheel that's tucked in behind the residue wheels. And I thought, man, that makes sense. Because if my treader wheels are on the side of the wheels, what happens if I hit a dirt clod or a bump? Well, it goes with it, doesn't it? But if it's tucked behind, now my wheels are going to clean a path, and that gauge wheel is going to be traveling in a cleaned, smoothed surface. And then they have two airbags, one that applies up pressure, one that applies down pressure, tucked into this casting. And so now we have the control from the cab to really fine tune and get the right amount of applied pressure or lift pressure to control those row cleaners to the optimum. So here's a video of a planter in Indiana that ran one Reveal row cleaner last spring. And the 5th row in is the Reveal. It's black, it's all black, it doesn't have the silver wheels on it. And the other wheels all have row-mounted row cleaners. So the Reveal is bar-mounted, all the other rows were row-mounted, row-mounted and bar-mounted. So as we watch this video, look at the row cleaners as they hit clods, as they run over uneven surface. Look at the Reveal. When the Reveal hits those clods, it blows them out. I asked the research engineers the other day, I said, in your research, have you ever seen a side-by-side analysis that Reveal did not have a better row unit ride. He said, no, never. He said, it's always been a better row unit ride. Even compared to no row cleaner, it's been a better row unit ride. So I said, well, you got any maps on that? He said, yeah, I can get you some maps. And so here's a field where they did it 9 miles an hour. They had a row unit amount of row cleaner compared to Reveal, and it was a 12% difference in row unit ride. Improvement on the Reveal side. And then he took all of the R&D plots and they averaged them all together. And Reveal had a 9% improvement in row unit ride over the standard tine row cleaner that was row unit mounted with clean sweep and a treader wheel. And you can see in that it was even 1% better than no row cleaner at all. That was the average on all the plots. So then the other thing is, when we move that row cleaner off of the faceplate and put it on the bar, now we just eliminated, did you see those row cleaners running down the field, how they're doing this? How does that play with the weight variability on the row unit? Pretty big, isn't it? I mean, going like this, and it's row unit mounted. So when we remove that, what it does is it lessens the amount of applied downforce that we need on this row cleaner to keep those disc blades into the ground to 2 inches, wherever we have it set, consistently with every seed. We lessen the variability. So applied downforce in these plots show that Reveal required 130 pounds less applied downforce to the row unit to keep it in the ground. And then when we looked at all of the R&D plots on applied downforce, again, it was 118 less pounds with Reveal rows compared to the other rows. Downforce is a big deal when it comes to trying to manage emergence, right? The gauge wheels, the firmer, the closing wheels, all that requires downforce. If that's variable, it's going to be harder for me as the operator to manage that. And so then we go into emergence, and R&D dug up a plot that showed an emergence score that was only 1.4% better with Reveal over the standard row cleaner. It's not a lot. You're thinking, well, that's only 1.4 or more plants per 100 plants, right? And we calculate that out. It's 2.7 bushel difference, right? And so then I reached out to Jason Webster. I said, hey, do you have any commercial plots on row cleaners that you did in 2021? He said, yeah, absolutely. He got it to me, and here's where it is. And Reveal had a 4.5 bushel advantage on notch 1. The average of all those was 212 bushel. The best with the standard row cleaner with clean sweep was 208. 4.5 bushel better than that. So again, what we learned is what? Residue matters, right? Managing residue creates an agronomic cost. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put seed in the soil, and we've got to create a furrow. And our goal in creating a furrow, we got to be thinking through that. We want to think like a seed, not just from the surface, but look at that seed. What's that seed's environment around there? And as we think through that, there's 2 objectives that we have. We want to create depth, consistency. We want every seed to be the exact same depth. We also we want to eliminate any air pockets, because if we have too much air pockets, it's going to create evaporation of moisture. We're going to dry that environment out, right? We don't want excess air. And so the next thing is we don't want to have compaction, right? We want to eliminate air pockets. We want to create depth, consistency. We want to prevent compaction. And so compaction is going to squeeze, instead of just the big air pockets, it's going to squeeze the macropore structure out of that soil. And the problem is that macropore structure is critical. It holds the water and the oxygen that seed needs to have, right? The available water-available oxygen. So that's the negative. So as we think through that, we've got to be thinking about the dynamics of that soil, right? It's really comes down to soil density management, right? An ideal healthy soil, they claim, for the plant and for the microbes that both need water and oxygen is 50% solid, 50% pore space, and that pore space is half water, half air. So as we think of that, planting that seed, we want to create the ideal environment, not just for germination, but for that plant, that root system to flourish and take every opportunity of that environment to feed itself. And so as we look at soil density management, we got to think through everywhere that we touch that soil, we have an impact on soil density. Soil density management. We're going to sidewalls and firm seed, and we're going to close it. Many times since I've been a kid, I walk fields, and I'll see that the closing system didn't quite do the job. There's air pockets, there's gaps. Sometimes you find a slot in parts of the field. You think, man, I should have jumped out and increased it right there, right? Yeah, but over there it was too much, right? And so as we think through the closing systems on the market, our engineers have been researching closing systems since 2011. And when you have too light of applied force, almost every system you find air pockets around there. And if it's too heavy, it eliminated the air pockets, but now we got to worry about compaction. And so as we walk fields, what do we find? Well, does that furrow look good? Does that seed trench look good? Doesn't, does it? It doesn't give you a good feeling when you're out walking the field and you see that. How about this one? That one really makes you nervous, doesn't it? You're praying for a rain. Just a ½ inch, Lord. Just give me a ½ inch tonight. I need it. Otherwise, we're in trouble. This is going to dry out and slot open. And so a couple years ago, the engineers designed a system called FurrowForce. It's a 2-stage closing system. And it's got a set of double disc up front that close the furrow from the bottom up, and then a set of wheels in the back that firm that down. Okay, so here's a video of that system running. And as I walk behind this system, I never find any slotted gaps. I never find a furrow that I say, man, that doesn't look good. This is a slow-mo video, and you can see behind that, it's beautiful. Okay, and then if we look underneath, we say, well, yeah, but is there air pockets down around the seed, right? So if we look underneath, the way it's designed, you look at those disc blades, they're like this. And you watch this video, and you watch it close that trench from the bottom up. You see, there's no air pockets left. It not only that, but it destroys the slick end sidewall if there is one. It obliterates it. And so as we look at that, the FurrowForce closing, when we walk behind it, here's a conventional tilled environment that we walk and we can't find slots. And then there's no-till environments, we've done the same thing. I asked an agronomist, one of our agronomists the other day, I said, have you ever found an environment that FurrowForce didn't get it closed? And he got thinking, he said, no, never. Because the way it's designed, it will close the furrow, right? And the only thing we got to really be careful of is not to over-apply pressure and create compaction. As we dig and we look for that seed and we look for air pockets, the most common statement that I get from growers that run FurrowForce is that they can't find the furrow. When they're out digging behind the planter, they can't find the trench. And so therefore, it takes them longer to find the seed because we've blown it apart with those disc blades by fracturing that from the ground up, from the bottom up, and you find that seed in there, just exactly what you're wanting to find. And so all the planter brands on the market that you see up here, we have FurrowForce designed for all of them, right? And so the Case, the Kinsey, the White, and the Harvest International. Here's the PTI. I reached out to Jason. I said, do you have any FurrowForce studies you did for 2021? He said, yeah, we did an Emergence study. So they had different treatments. You can see how they're listed there. And every 12 hours, they said how many corn plants emerged from the first plant within the very first 12 hours. And then how many emerged 12 to 24. Every 12 hours, they went out and they said how many emerged. And 84.9% of the plants emerged out of the FurrowForce treatment within the first 12 hours. A dramatic increase over the other closing wheels. But it really comes down to what? It comes down to moisture, oxygen, and soil. And it's soil density management. It's eliminating air pockets and not over-applying force. And when we get that right, guys, we're going to get a better emergence score. When we followed that, Jason and his team in Pontiac followed that PTI research to yield, and it was a 4.46 bushel advantage. Again, what did it teach us? It taught us that if I can get residue clean and I can get emergence right, I'm going to win, right? It's going to drive yield. That's where the maximum yield is when we can manage those variables right. So those tools do a great job of doing that. So guys, once we get the residue clean and we get the seed planted and we get consistent depth and consistent soil density and we do a good job of closing, now that seed is to the surface. What's next? Now I'm going to turn it over to Tristan Herman, and he's going to talk through stand evaluation.
All right, thanks, Doug. So again, my name is Tristan Herman. I work in the R&D department here at Precision Planting. And like Doug said, where he has left us, we've done a good job putting the seed into the ground, and our corn, beans, canola, whatever it is just spiking through the surface of the soil. And so we're going to pick up the discussion at this point on how we evaluate our crops once they come out of the ground. And what we're going to drill down on is we're going to drill down on what we think the most important thing to scout for is, you'll hear it all day today, and that is emergence. So what is emergence? Just many of us have this in our head already, but just for the discussion we're going to have now, so we're absolutely clear, sometimes when we talk to growers, we find ourselves in a discussion and maybe there's some confusion between what is emergence. So sometimes we get emergence confused with stand. And so at least at Precision Planting, when we talk about stand, what we're talking about is the number of crops that made it through the surface of the soil. So let's say you're planting corn, you put 35,000 seeds an acre of corn in the ground. How many of those actually came through? Did you get 32,000, 33,000? What was the percentage? Emergence is looking at something a little different. Emergence is looking at the uniformity of each of those plants. So theoretically, it is possible to have 100% stand. 35,000 seeds went in, 35,000 came up. 100% perfect stand. But what happens when that stand is uneven? Is there a penalty to be paid when that 100% stand is uneven, when our emergence is poor? So how do we measure this at Precision Planting? Well, we've been doing, for the past 20 years, we've been doing something we call flag testing. And what we'll do is, right after we plant a field of corn, we'll go out into that field and we'll pick a section that's pretty uniform row to row. We'll mark off a section of that field. We'll maybe go 3, 4, 5 rows wide, 17.5 feet long, that 1,000th of an acre run, and we'll mark that section. And then we wait until plants start emerging. And that first day that corn starts emerging out of the ground, we will come out and we will put a green flag in the ground to represent the corn that came out, that emerged on that first day. And then we'll wait exactly 24 hours. We'll come out in that field and put a blue flag next to anything that came up that second day, one day behind the other ones. Then we'll come out a third day, we'll put a yellow colored flag. Same thing, we'll come out a fourth day, we'll put a red colored flag. And then we'll follow this all the way to harvest. This, right before we come through with the combine, we'll go out to that section of the field, we'll hand harvest all the ears, we'll categorize them by their flag color, and then they'll weigh them to see, okay, what was the actual cost of these late emerging plants? And like I said, we've been doing tests like this for 20 years. You've heard about them before if you've come to Winter Conference. I'm going to put up the past 3 years of collected data from our PTI farm, from Jason and Webster's farm. And what we found, year over year, depending on the heat, the sunlight on the day that the test is being done, it can be a little bit different, move the numbers a little bit, but overall the trend is clear that when corn or any other plant is coming out of the ground, the clock is ticking on us. And every day, every hour that corn emerges different from its neighbors, there's a penalty to be paid. The first day from this 3-year study, we lose 15% of yield potential right out of the gate. Now, 15% might not sound like much, but if there's a significant number of delayed plants, that adds up really, really fast. The huge penalty starts coming the days after. 80, 90% losses for corn that just came up a day, 2 days, 3 days behind its neighbors. So there is a real penalty to be paid for late emerging plants. If we think about this another way, you've heard it before, you'll hear it in other sessions today. When a corn plant is one leaf collar behind its neighbors, it will only put on half an ear, 50% right out of the gate. If it's two collars behind its neighbors, it will not put on an ear at all. That corn plant is a weed. It is pulling nutrients from its neighboring corn plants and not giving us anything in return. So emergence is absolutely critical. And you'll hear it other times today. What drives emergence? Both good and bad, emergence is driven by things we have in our control. It's driven by good planter maintenance. It's driven by proper downforce, Doug mentioned it, residue management, closing. It's things we can control. And so we want you guys, you've heard about it already today, to be able to run tests just like we've done for the last 20 years. So if you go to precisionplanting.com/free, sign up. We'll send you your very own emergence flagging kit to use on your farm this coming spring. Corn, beans, canola, sugar beets, cotton, whatever. We will send you a kit targeted for that crop and for you to use on your farm. So other than flags, let's talk about scouting. How are we scouting for emergence on our farm? So we're among friends. This is a safe space. Let's be honest with each other for just a minute. This is how most of us scout our fields. We take a look from the road, we take a drive, and see how things look. So this video is purely for demonstration purposes. Corey Mulbauer is a great agronomist. He would never scout from the road. I'm sure in something like this, he's just checking the neighbor's field or something like that. And even, so I'm the oldest of 4 in my family. And I remember growing up, every Sunday, we would load up into the family minivan, we'd drive from home into church, and we would take State Highway 90. Easy drive, 7 miles in, perfectly flat road. But it seemed like over the summer, when I was young, we would take beat up Laura Road home. And I would ask from the back of the minivan, hey Dad, why are we going home on Laura Road instead of back on the highway? And my mother, she would roll her eyes and she said, oh, your father, he's got to take a look at the Plattner farm. Or he's got to look at the Reinhardt farm. Or he's just got to get a glance as we drive by. And I think we can all relate to this a little bit. But let's be honest, for something as detailed as emergence, how well can we see uneven emergence or even emergence from the road? And I don't think we can. So what do? We take it up a level. We load up the four-wheeler or the dirt bike in the back of the pickup truck. We head out to our fields and we see how things are looking. But again, how good of a sense of emergence are we getting when we're buzzing up and down rows on the four-wheeler? Again, I don't know if we're getting that good of a sense across a wide range of our acres. I think this is where we all want to be. We all have a desire to be in our fields doing detailed analysis of our crop. Flagging, marking off sections, counting late emergers. This is where we all want to be, but at least for myself, I often don't get to this level. And why is that? And I think it comes down to 2 reasons. The first reason is that it takes time. When plants are spiking through the ground, when it's time to study emergence, it's still a really busy time on the farm. It's spray season, side dressing, and maybe even planting, replanting is still happening. And it's been so busy during the planting season, it'd be nice just to spend an evening at home with the wife and kids. And so to take that trip to the field, it can be really difficult to do. And then the second reason is that it's complicated. At least for myself, when I go out to scout my fields for emergence, and I'm in the field and I think, okay, I forget, what charts do I need? How do I do this? How do I add this all up to tell me if I've got good emergence or not? It's so complicated, I just kind of throw my hands up and I'll just take a look from the four-wheeler again. So we at Precision Planting think about this a lot. So how have we solved this in the past? Well, in 2010, we developed what we call the Pogo Stick. And the Pogo Stick is it's a really cool iPad app that sits on top of the Pogo Stick. That Pogo Stick has a tape measure on it, 100-foot tape measure, with an encoder built in. And all you have to do is stake the end of that tape measure and work your way down a row of emerged crops. and you just mark the plant locations, mark whether they're late emergers, a leaf collar behind or two, and when you get to the end of a run, all you have to do is push a button, and it spits out a ton of useful information for us. It spits out information like our stand, like our emergence data you see up here, singulation, spacing. And let me tell you, when it comes to planter maintenance issues or what we should focus on, it makes those things light up like a Christmas tree. It's a really powerful scouting tool. You know, the Pogo Stick has been the thing that evaluates the success of our products. You look at the products up here that are focused on emergence that we've released over the last 10, 15 years. The Pogo Stick has not only evaluated those products for us, throughout its history, it has pointed us what's the next step we should make on the planter? What's the next way we can improve emergence on the farm? And we found this information so useful. In 2016, we made this tool available to our dealers so they could take it out to your farms and highlight emergence on your farm. And so since 2012, between our R&D department and our dealers, we've scored over 20 million plants in the field. So one of the things I hope you take away from this session is if you haven't before, talk to your dealer and have him bring the Pogo Stick out to your farm. Even if you're not a historical precision planting customer, talk to your dealer and they would love to bring it out. So the Pogo has been a great tool for us. We'll continue to use it. But there's a problem of scale here. We want to have a good idea of emergence across 100% of our acres. And is the Pogo Stick the right tool for that? So let's say you're an average-sized grower. You grow 1,000 acres of corn. It's split up over 10 fields. And you're already using the Pogo Stick. You do 5 100-foot Pogo runs in each of those 10 fields. In my opinion, with the growers I've interacted with, this would make you a top-notch scout. This would put you, in that upper percentages of the scouts we interact with. When you've taken it to this level with the Pogo Stick, you've actually only evaluated the emergence on 0.05% of the acres of your farm. And if the goal is 100, this isn't even cutting it close. And we would not accept visibility of 0.05% in any other aspect of our farming operation. So why do we accept it with something as important as emergence? So how are we attacking this issue at Precision Planting, this problem of scale? So one way is we're looking at the Pogo itself. What do all the iPads that run the Pogo app today have built into their functionality? And they have cameras. Every iPad has a camera built into the outside of it. So one thing that is in development right now, the same team that designed the Pogo app is working on a new iPad application where you simply point the iPad at the emerging crop and it automatically detects where the corn is, what leaf stage it's at, the spacing, all this kind of same useful information we've gotten from the Pogo app in the past. So we're really excited where this technology is going to take us. The team that is working on that is here today. Talk to them after this session. Come up to the stage and have them show you how it's working. We're really excited to see where this is going to go in the future. But the same problem is still there. The new app is going to make scouting way easier. But even with the new app, whether it's flags, four-wheelers, even some of the new drone scouting technology, all of it requires a trip to the field that we weren't planning on making otherwise. And again, it's a busy season, it's a busy time of the year, this is time we don't have. So what's the ultimate solution? We've talked about sprayers already today. You're going to hear about sprayers more in other sessions. We believe that the solution is on the sprayer. So for many of you that own and operate your own sprayer, this is the view you have from the cab during your first post pass. If the cab wasn't, or the hood of the sprayer wasn't obstructing the view. This is the view you would have. What do you do when you're spraying your first post pass and you encounter a bare patch? You encounter a weedy area. You run across a spot where you do notice the emergence is uneven. What we do is we make a mental note We try to remember what, oh, this happened in this area. Do I remember that happening in years past as well? We're actually scouting from the sprayer cab. But the problem is we don't do it well. With a 120-foot boom, that's 48 rows at 15 miles an hour. That's over 2,000 plants a second passing underneath the sprayer boom. It's just too much to keep track of. Our minds and brains can't process information that fast. But cameras can. And so we believe the future of crop scouting at scale is being done on the pass you're already making through the field with camera technology. We think it's going to look a little something like you see up on the stage. With cameras laid out, a few across the boom, a few across the chassis. These cameras that have software trained in them to look down at the crop and evaluate things as we move through the field. So what we're going to do, rather than just talking about this, is we're going to do a live demo up on the stage here. So if we can bring the camera up. What we're doing is we're looking at this camera on the sprayer boom. And what it is doing, you can see in the top right of this image, is that is what the camera is detecting as corn and what is the stage. It's delineating and turning all the corn white and fading everything else into black. And then it's looking, we're zoomed in on 2 rows, and what we're going to do, it's looking at the relative biomass of each plant along its row. And so what we've purposefully done is pick out corn that is all the same leaf stage. And so we're reporting really good emergence. So what I'm going to do is we've got a couple late emergers. I'm going to go ahead and swap out a couple of these even plants, and I'm going to throw in some of these late emergers. And then just for kicks, I've got some pigweed, some morning glory, everyone's favorites, right? We're going to throw those in the mix as well. And what do we see? So our emergence score on row 2 dropped because I've introduced late emergers. And because I threw the weeds in the center, this is doing more than just looking at what's green and what's brown, or what's green and what's not. This is software that is looking at the difference between what is corn and what is weeds, maybe a volunteer crop from the year before. This is really powerful technology that we're really excited about getting on the sprayer. So if we can go ahead and bring the presentation back. So I hope you guys get a chance to talk to some of the guys that developed this technology. They're in this session today. Talk to them afterwards. It's amazing to see how far we've come over the past year. So technology like this is built on data. It's built on huge amounts of data. What you see in the videos up here is one of our computer vision engineers, Ryan Knuffman, out in our test gator. We rigged it up with tube steel, a couple welded pieces, tarp straps, a couple of our prototype cameras. And Ryan and Joe and the team spent a ton of time out in the field just gathering images of corn in a bunch of different growth stages. And we've built this into a database of tens of thousands of images. And in order to make software work well, we've had to take this massive database and we have to painstakingly train it. We have to go into these images and draw little lines around where all the corn is, where all the weeds. I mean, this is stuff that can take hours per picture of corn. It's painstaking work, and our team has done a great job at this. I mean, I'm so proud of what they've been able to do and the dedication to the craft. And at the end, we end up with a predictive model that is really good, as you saw, at pulling out what's corn, what's the ground, what are the weeds, and giving us an accurate picture of what's going on in the field. So let's look at this image again. We said that you're scouting from the sprayer cab, but too much is happening. In the future, armed with sprayers, or armed with cameras across the sprayer, you will be able to have full visibility across 100% of your acres of what scouting actually looks like. Stand, emergence. You're going to hear about weeds in another session today. As you're in the sprayer cab, having real-time metrics of the things that were previously not available at scale, truly across every acre of the field, not just the places we went to with the four-wheeler. We also see a time in the future when we can, the moment we pull out of a field, we have generated summary reports of emergence, of stand, weed pressure, all the things we find valuable instantly given to us as we pull out of the field. And then we have a year-by-year record of which fields, which hybrids, which areas. You think about the maps that could come out of this. Information, a year-by-year record, previously unavailable. So where are we going with this technology? So this past year, we've been out gathering data, testing with corn. We look forward in this next year to take this to other crops, into many more fields, all different sprayer makes and models. It's going to be a big year of testing for us, and we're really excited about it. So let's just recap. We're kind of coming to a close. So I hope, even with the exciting technology that we're talking about today, I still hope the main thing you take away from this session is how critical emergence is. Emergence absolutely should be the focus of the planter pass. We need to drive towards good emergence with things that Doug mentioned, with row cleaning, with residue management, with closing, downforce control. You're going to hear about planter maintenance in another session. But all with the goal of driving home good emergence. And emergence should also be the focus of our scouting efforts. If you haven't before, call your dealer, have him bring the Pogo out to your farm. They would love to get it out there. And then we're really excited about some of the future opportunities with the scouting, the app, with the sprayer-based scouting, being able to bring scouting truly at scale to your farm for the first time. So thank you all for being here today. We're really excited to be able to host Winter Conference in person. We've got a few minutes. Talk to the guys that work on the Pogo app. Talk to the guys that have developed some of this technology. And then we'll turn it over to your group leaders. So thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate it.